Welcome, traveler. Thank you for joining me today for part 1 of this original fantasy adventure, drawn from real Dungeons & Dragons gameplay. Light your lantern, prick up those ears, and listen well. Stormlight simmered on the horizon as Kaelen and Brynna followed the overgrown path toward Whispering Pines, the trees pressing close with a hush that felt more like held breath than peace. Crows circled above the tree line, silent and slow, and the scent of smoke lingered on the wind. Old, but not forgotten. They had been sent to investigate a merchant caravan that vanished near the village's outskirts. But the deeper they walked into the pines, the clearer it became. It wasn't mere banditry. Neither spoke, but both felt it. A wrongness pulsing between the soil. Somewhere ahead, something had been disturbed, and the road to the village would offer no ordinary welcome. The last wagon tracks had vanished a mile back, swallowed by the moss-choked forest like the bones of a forgotten god. Kaelen crouched near a spindling pine, fingers brushing a torn scrap of canvas snagged on a bramble. His sharp, mismatched eyes narrowed as he turned the fabric over in his hand.
They came this way.
Ahead, past the hush of the underbrush and the tight breath of the overcast sky, the chapel emerged from the tree line like a corpse remembering its posture. The air smelled of pine resin and something older, earth damp with secrets, rot buried deep in the roots. Not even the crows called here. The chapel rose in ruin, stone dark with mildew and time. Its roof had collapsed in places, ivy clutching at its sides like long fingers unwilling to let go. A single worn symbol, a silver crescent, carved in relief, still adorned the lintel above the broken door. It was Saloon's mark, faded, cracked, and still watching. Brynna stepped beside him, her voice barely louder than the breath of the trees.
This was once sacred to Saloon. Now even the trees shy away.
Kaelen didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence had spoken for them both. He studied the path, what little of it remained. There were boot prints in the mud, not fresh, but not old. Twigs broken at deliberate angles. He marked them in his mind as he would trap signs. A path, not a trail. Ahead, the doors stood wounded. One ajar, the other splintered at the hinges like a jaw knocked loose in a brawl. Brynna clutched her symbol of Saloon, not in fear, but in mourning. Defiled. The word tasted like ash. There was no ambush, no cry from within, only the slow rise of dread. Together they moved through the courtyard, boots whispering on the overgrown stones. A hush lay across the land, weighty as snow, and from the darkened arch of the chapel's heart came a sound neither of them wanted to hear. Chanting. Low, rhythmic words not meant for daylight. The chapel wasn't empty. Whatever had silenced the birds, scattered the caravan, and broken Saloon's threshold, it was still inside. Kaelen checked the tension of his bowstring, while Brynna whispered a prayer. They did not look at each other. They both knew what came next. The faint chanting grew clearer. Kaelen motioned Brynna to stay low as he circled the edge of the structure. Half the roof was collapsed and tall weeds choked the side path. Then he found it. A shattered stained glass window just tall enough to peer through. Inside, candlelight flickered across the cracked stone floor. Shadows swayed across crumbling pews. The air smelled of mold and ash. Voices, 3 of them, rose and fell in unholy rhythm, centered around a glowing red sigil scrawled onto the dais. The stained glass above Kaelen's head still clung to fragments of color-faded moonlight blues and shattered silver stars, once sacred, now forgotten. Kaelen crouched low, one eye just above the ledge.
3 cultists, kneeling, facing the sigil. They're not guards, they're ritualists.
Brynna crouched 10 paces behind him, drew a silver symbol of Saloon from her cloak. She murmured a prayer, letting divine energy guide her senses using detect magic. A frown creased her brow.
That circle, it's necrotic. There's something wrong with that door.
Kaelen moved toward the warped chapel entrance, ducking behind a leaning pillar.
I'll check.
He reached toward the archway, brushing the air near the doorframe with the flat of his blade. A shimmer, nearly invisible, rippled across the threshold. It indeed was a trap. Kaelen shifted closer, squinting, trying to trace the pattern of the ward, and the instant his hand nudged the field, it flashed. A burst of pale violet light cracked the silence like lightning. The sigil pulsed in response, and inside, the chanting stumbled. Kaelen dropped low and rolled back toward the window, cursing under his breath. Inside the chapel, the voices rose in alarm. The cultists are now aware someone is near. A sudden hum filled the air, and the doorway flared with crackling red energy. Kaelen reeled back, hand to his eyes. Inside, the chanting ceased, followed by hurried footsteps and the rasp of steel on stone. Arcane energy buzzed like hornets in the threshold, a crimson shimmer clinging to the cracked stone arch. The scent of burning sage and charged dust drifted outward. Within, the flickering candlelight danced wildly as the sigil guttered and pulsed, momentarily disrupted. Boots scraped across stone, deliberate, approaching. One shadow peeled away from the others and moved toward the door. The others remained, voices growing more fervent, faster. Kaelen ducked back behind the warped column, flexing the fingers of his bow hand.
We've been made.
Brynna didn't hesitate. She drew her holy symbol, eyes hard with divine purpose.
Then we don't wait.
He glanced again at the arch. The barrier's glow sputtered and died like a snuffed candle.
Trap's gone,
he muttered, testing the threshold. It pulsed once beneath his fingers, then faded. The passage was clear. Whatever protection had flared was spent. Kaelen pulled an arrow from his quiver, knocked it smoothly. Brynna murmured the first syllables of a spell. A figure stepped into view, cultist, robed and masked, a curved dagger glinting in his hands. He scanned the courtyard, eyes sweeping across the brush. Behind him, the ritual chanting resumed, louder, strained, building toward a crescendo. The air inside shimmered again, heartless but heavy. Kaelen inhaled, focused. The arrow flew before the cultist finished turning. Kaelen's arrow sliced through the air with a deadly whisper, striking the cultist in the chest. The man did not fall. He snarled through blood-slicked teeth and surged forward like a man already half-possessed. Inside, the rhythm of the chant broke, staggered, and resumed with a newfound urgency. The wind found its voice, keening through the broken rafters and jagged stone like a ghost denied rest. Candlelight danced madly across cracked walls, revealing the age and rot of a chapel long forgotten by anything holy. The sigil at the front pulsed with malevolence, bathing the altar in hellish red. The scent of burnt myrrh mixed with copper of fresh blood. Something deeper than sound reverberated in the bones, an unnatural heartbeat ticking toward catastrophe. Kaelen didn't hesitate. Another arrow knocked, loosed, a fluid motion honed by countless hunts. The cultist flinched as the arrow struck, faltering in his stride, but adrenaline, or dark magic, kept him upright. Brynna stepped forward, moonlight reflecting off her holy symbol. Her voice rang like a silver bell in the chaos. A flash of divine brilliance struck Cultist A square in the chest. His scream cut short as his body crumbled in the doorway, limbs twitching in a final spasm. Cultist B raised a trembling hand, muttering a sharp, single-word command.
Drop!
But Kaelen's will held. The magic splintered harmlessly against his resolve, like wind against a stone outcrop. Behind them, Cultist C remained kneeling, untouched, chanting louder, drawing power from the withering sigil. The lines etched into the stone flared, red veins pulsing as if the chapel itself had a circulatory system. The sigil throbbed with unstable energy. Sparks leapt between glyphs. The ritual was speaking, and the lead cultist was its anchor. Kaelen burst through the ruined doorway, his boots hitting cracked stone with a thud, and his blade gleamed in the dim blood-red light. Behind him, Brynna followed, shield high, her lips whispering a prayer sharp enough to cut glass. Ahead, the remaining cultists whirled around the glowing sigil, voices climbing in a pitch until they were nearly screams. There was a hum to the air, like 1,000 flies beating wings against the inside of their skulls. The floor vibrated beneath their feet, not with footsteps, but with power. Runes withered across the ground, leaking black-red light in a pulse too fast to follow. The sigil now looked less like a symbol and more like a wound. Brynna's presence cast a defiant silver glow, pushing back the dark like a memory of the moon. But even her magic seemed strained here, and the air thick with rot old blood and storm ozone. Above them, rafters groaned. Something waited just beyond the veil. Kaelen charged without hesitation, targeting the cultist closest to him. Mid-chant, eyes rolled back in Zoltry. A blade sliced through fabric and flesh. Cultist B gasped, stumbled back, his blood splattering across the sigil's edge. Brynna raised her voice in defiance, calling on Saloon's light. A shimmering ward wrapped around him, faintly luminous against the choking red-black gloom. The wounded cultist didn't flee. He turned to his partner, Cultist C, and clasped hands. The chanting deepened, twisted, the sigil blazed. Veins of dark power surged up the chapel walls like vines racing toward a trellis. Stones cracked. The altar wept ash. The ritual had become a runaway spell fueled by blood, pain, and desperation. They were forcing it, or it was forcing them. Either way, the end was coming too fast. Kaelen pushed forward through the pulsing heat and stench. Brynna followed, her shield catching sparks of magic like fireflies. The floor pitched beneath them, the circle threatening to swallow the whole front of the chapel in its hungry glow. One wrong step, and the ritual would finish, with them inside it. This has been part 1 of this amazing adventure. Join me soon for part 2. Until next time, traveler.